Hi, and welcome to the Same 24 Hours podcast. I'm Meredith Atwood, author of the book, The Year of No Nonsense. I'm a former attorney turned writer, speaker, and Ironman triathlete. Although right now, all I really like to do is lift weights. We all have the same 24 hours, but it's what we do in those hours that leads to our greatest health, happiness, and success. It's my goal to crack the code on a life of less nonsense so we can all make the most of our 24 hours. So let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Same 24 Hours podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Atwood. Today's guest is Brit Barron. How are you?
Hello.
Hi.
I am doing well. Excited to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. So let's dive right in. The thing that caught my eye, I was on Amazon. Your book came up as a suggestion, and it said, Britt grew up in a 1990s megachurch. And I was like, oh, I know this world. Like, me too. I mean, I always joke that my parents were in a cult.
Yeah.
We were at a very super crazy church for the first few years, well, like kindergarten to second grade. And then we went to a mega church that was a little less crazy. But anyway, I saw that and I said, okay, we got some stuff to talk about just from that. But so as a jumping off point, maybe we can start there and see where it leads.
Yeah. Well, I always say, like, growing up in the 90s in the evangelical church world, it was like, that was the height. Like, I don't know if you remember, it was like living in a world inside of a world. Like, yes. You could exist, like, there were like Christian competition for everything, like a Christian bookstore, a Christian record store, Christian movie theaters. And you're like, what is happening? Like, our whole, right. like, are we creating another reality over here?
Right. And so when you say mega church, like, this is like Joel Osteen type mega church, right?
Yeah. I mean, a little smaller than Joel Osteen,
but an arena.
Than your average. Yes, exactly. Like right. Lights, fog, lasers.
Yes.
Like, all the zoo animals come in at Christmas to be a part of the service.
Oh my gosh.
Like,
I feel you.
Coming down the aisle. You're like, what? Where am I?
That is such an interesting point. So the church I went to, it was becoming that when I sort of went to college, and I went back to visit, and they had a new campus. But the same thing, I wasn't there for the zoo animals, but I saw like the bookstore, and there was a coffee shop. Yeah. I really feel cheated. Okay, so continue. A world within a world.
Yeah. So I lived in that, and just kept it going. I went to a Christian college. And then I worked at a college, and then I became a pastor at a mega church. So I just really went in.
You went all in. Did you get to pet the zoo animals? Like,
I did not. We did, like, the church that I ended up working at, which, I mean, there are so many things where I'm like, as just an event, this is cool, but what does this directly have to do with the Bible? But I remember, like, putting on an event where we brought, like, snow. This was in Southern California. And we, like, made it snow, like, for the purposes of Jesus Christ. And so I did that. And I was in it. And then, which is what, a lot of my book talks about. When I was in that role, I met a girl, and I was like, oh no, but also, yay, oh my gosh, like, I was so.
When you say you met a girl, you mean you met a girl?
I mean, I met a girl, I fell in love, and she's now my wife, so spoiler alert, that happens. Yeah, but and that was such a shock, because that meant instant, like, the world within a world was no longer my home, right? So pretty jarring.
Yeah. So how did that, like, what did that look like for you? You met a girl, like, What was the internal, were you certain? Did you try and, like, Bible beat yourself out of it? Because I've heard that that's kind of the progression, especially people indoctrinated. And I mean, if you're bringing snow to California, you're like, surely I cannot love this girl, right?
Exactly. Yeah, no, it was hard. So, and I always joke that like I was so unaware of my own sexuality for so long. Like I wasn't one of those people who always knew I was gay and was just sort of like trying to keep it back. I truly just had such a disconnection from that part of my life and or part of myself. And growing up in the evangelical church, it's like every time I would say like, oh, I actually am not attracted to these boys, people would be like, oh, good for you. And I'd be like, oh, okay.
True love
Okay.
waits.
Yeah, exactly. I was like,
Did you
oh
get a gold
wow,
band? I did.
I did. And I was like, this is so shameful. Like I always feel bad. You know, everyone's having sex, like no one's actually waiting, like except for me. And I just remember thinking like, no, I'm taking this seriously. And my friends would be like, how do you do it? Like, how do you resist? And I'm like, just pray, just prayer. And now I look back, I'm like, oh, because I'm gay and I didn't even want to have sex with these boys. So that was just like, it was a perfect storm for me, just being so oblivious to my own self. And so when we met, at first I was like, this is my best friend. This is my new best friend. And my wife kind of felt the same way. She also didn't know she was gay. And so
did you meet at church?
yeah, yes, we did. We met at megachurch. She also worked there in the creative department. And so we were like, oh, let's be best friends.
Right.
And you know, a few months later we were like, like I don't feel this way about any of like my best friends since I was 12. Like I do not feel this way about and so we started to realize like, oh, there's more here. And that was tough. The initial sort of like, honestly, 6 months to a year, we were just like, no, this is a test. Like we need to overcome this or something, until we finally were like, wait, what? Like this is the best thing that's ever happened to us. But that was like literally a 3-year process of us finally getting to a place where we're like, we love this about ourselves. We love each other. This is a good thing. Forget anyone who says anything different. Like we're getting married and having a life. So that it was a lot of, it was a lot.
And how recent was this?
So we got married. We came out in 2016. We got married in 2017.
Okay, so sort of recent. So yeah. What was the response from the people?
Some people loved it. And then some people hated it. We got the response that we had feared. That's what I talk about a lot in the book, is sometimes we talk ourselves out of doing things because we're like, the things we're afraid of might happen. And and then you have sometimes people in the world who are like, no, they won't happen, just do it. And I'm kind of the person in the middle that's like, they probably will, but you should still do it.
Yeah, right.
And so, yeah, everything we feared kind of happened. We both lost our jobs and sort of communities. We had we had just hard conversation after hard conversation after hard conversation. You know, probably some of the hardest parts were, there were 3 people who we asked to be in our wedding. So like 3 of our closest friends in the world. And they said no, because they can't stand for that. And, you know, sometimes peripheral people on the internet saying something, you're like, whatever, Lisa, I've never met you. But it got pretty hard when it was like family members and close friends, mentors, like people we had been a part of this other little world with. It was really hard. And at the same exact time, we had friends who we thought we would have hard conversations with, who were just like, yes, let's do this. You're doing this. I'm with you. I got you. And we were like, wow, okay, yes.
I wouldn't have picked you. Right.
I mean, we were both pleasantly and unpleasantly surprised. Like that's some people in our life who just like showed up. We did not see it coming. And so it was this real, like, true season of like bittersweet, like so much good, so much love, so much freedom, so many hard conversations, like so many tears, and just all of it happened at the same time.
Literally the full range of human emotion.
Exactly.
And
Like
so when you're
everyone.
on that roller coaster, the natural thing to do is to take on a project like writing a book. I mean,
Exactly. You're
why
like, you know
not?
what? I'm having some major life crisis. I'm gonna write this down.
Right. I'm going to write this down and I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm
Yeah,
sure
yeah,
writing a book is fine.
yeah. It was like so sad because, I mean, not sad. I signed up for it, obviously, but
Right.
we, I felt like we had kind of arrived on the other side of that season in a lot of ways. And then that's when I started writing the book. So now I'm like back in therapy, like,
Reliving.
why, yeah, like, why am I doing this? I just was, as I'm writing, like I remember
Yes.
things, like it all was happening so fast, like, and everything felt so important. I just felt like I was treading water. And so being like on solid ground in a stable place and looking back, like you start to pick out other little things and you're like, oh my God, that actually happened. Like I actually, like that was a real thing. Jeez.
Right. Right. I
Yeah.
mean, I went through the same experience. So I was going to write this lighthearted, funny book called The Year of No Nonsense. It's about
Mm-hmm.
this experiment where I was going to get rid of nonsense for a year. Well,
Mm-hmm.
it just had me nosedive faceplant straight into childhood trauma and all sorts of stuff. And I'm like, I started therapy. I'm writing the book in the 11th hour. I'm like, wait, I think I figured out something else. And like the book ended up not, it has funniness in it, but
Mm-hmm.
it ended up just being a different beast altogether because that the writing process, I mean, I think almost writers do it more to heal themselves. We don't mean to. We're like, I have something to tell the world, but then in the middle of it, you're like, oh shoot, I gotta figure this out for me. This is actually about me.
Absolutely. Oh my, literally oh, I really need to share this message. You know, this is so
Right.
important. And it hasn't
We
burned. I'm like,
try to start well.
yeah, exactly.
We mean well.
I'm like telling my therapist every week. I'm like, and then that's when I realized something new about me. You know, and she's like, okay. She's like, how's writing going? I'm like, it's not about writing anymore, Abby. It's about me.
Right.
Exactly.
This is the death of everything. Like just,
Exactly.
I mean, oh my gosh, I feel you so much. So your
Yeah.
book, it came out last month?
It came out the end of July.
I don't even know what month we're in. I don't even know what day it is.
When
It's
literally when you said last month, I was like, I don't know if that was last month, so I'm just gonna say it was the end of July.
February, March, May,
Yeah,
June,
we can
whatever.
leave. We're still
All
probably in
right.
March, and
It was still
that's the
March.
joke. Yeah.
Right. So the book, Worth It, Overcome Your Fears and Embrace the Life You Were Made For.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Did you always have that title?
I did not always have that title. I very naively went in with no title, thinking the title will come to me. It will reveal itself to me through the pages. The publisher and I will have the exact same idea of what a good title is. And none of that happened. It was
Right.
like,
If that's the case, my title would have been This Book is Shit, Run Away.
yeah.
Subtitle, I don't know what I'm doing.
Subtitle, this was for me.
This was for me, not you.
Yes.
And everyone would buy it probably. Oh, what is
Yeah,
not for
honestly.
me? I want to know what's inside.
Yeah, I'd be like, oh, I'm interested. No, I didn't always have the title. And so, as we're getting into the writing process, the publisher's like, all right, let's talk title. And like, you know this, I'm sure. Publishers are amazing. They're just like a little bit in a different time period.
They're like a
And
mega church in
they are.
themselves.
They are. I'm like, do you hate me? Like the first few titles I sent over, I was like, you hate me and you don't want my book to succeed. And
We have to talk offline so we still have jobs.
I know.
But I hear you. It's almost like, you kind of feel like how it's going to work. And then they insert a different set of rules.
Yeah.
And then you're like, wait a minute, I thought we were playing by those rules. And they're like, no, that was in the other world. And you're like,
yeah.
I didn't hear we moved worlds.
Yeah, that's a normal time. This is Hogwarts rules. So
Yeah.
so it ended up very good, and I love the title. Like we both agreed literally in the 11th hour, where I was like, I'll put out this book with no title.
It's a coloring book.
Exactly. It's just a picture, and
It's
you can
just
guess
a
what it's
picture.
about. So we ended up having a phone call at one point. I was on like a writing retreat where I like wasn't supposed to be taking calls, and like finally the poster was like, well, what is it about? Like, what are you saying? And I was like, I'm telling people that like it's going to be hard and you never get to a place where you don't have fear anymore, but going through it every time is like worth it. And they're like, okay, well, what about worth it? Like, I honestly threw it out because I had shut down every idea that they were like so annoyed with me. I'm annoyed, like everyone's. And I was like, I like it. They're like, you like it? It's like, I like it. You like it? And then we were like, that's it, like hands off.
And then comes the cover art, dun dun dun. But I mean, it was still a good thing. You came to a resolution.
Yes, we did it. So
let's talk about fear, because I know that's a big part of the book, and also you touched on it, telling your story about love and the church. And so I spent a lot of my life afraid. From the early church that I went to. It was very much fire and brimstone. We all thought we were going to hell, like for everything, and so I was 5 years old with my little Precious Moments Bible and highlighter, like, okay, hell, got it, and I'm like 5, and I'd do something and I'd hit, I was terrified. I grew up terrified. And it wasn't until recently that I realized, oh my gosh, I don't need to be terrified. And God is not the God of my childhood. Like, I think the intersection of where fear and God meet, and like, I think that's such an interesting topic, because I know now that the God that I believe in and God I love is a different one than the God I did believe in. You know what I mean?
Totally.
How did that evolve for you with what you've been through in the past 4 years?
Yeah, it had to evolve. Because you're right. Like if I thought I was going to go to hell if I said a curse word, like imagine when I was like making out with a girl, I was like, this is going to get me for sure. Like
now I'm really going.
Now I'm going to the bottom part. So what was really helpful, and in the last chapter of my book, I talk about, like, the book's not explicitly religious or meant to be, but obviously a lot of my own baggage came from that. And what I thought I needed was to just leave that world, or leave that and just be like, okay, that was that and it's over here now. But what I found most healing was to reclaim that, and reclaim that narrative and understand it in a way. And because I went to a Christian school, of a minor in biblical studies, which is such a nerd thing. And so getting into a place where I actually was like, all right, this doesn't match what I know about God. So, and everything I quote unquote know about God came from like these people. It didn't come from like an experience with God. It came from like someone telling me that, someone explaining, someone saying like, oh, this passage, this is what this means.
Right.
And so doing like my own deep dive, and eventually was, a pastor again at this like weird, small, little progressive church where like literally half the church is gay and people do announcements in drag. And just realizing like, oh, it's, you don't have to be Christian to understand the beauty of this narrative and this story. And it actually starts, since he grew up in the church too, like we start the story usually in Genesis 3, where people are bad. But the story actually starts in Genesis 1, where people are good. And you sort of have this mythical tale of like, yeah, bad things can happen. And when you do, like, you need to show up and face what that happens. But ultimately, like, you are good. People are good. And if we can believe that, then we won't live into fear. We'll try to live into the reality of who we are, not into the reality of like what we might become, or what we're trying to move away from, but working into the reality of who we are, because we know that at our core, like, human beings are good. It's a real game changer. It became a game changer for me of like, man, I'm good at my core, and that's what I want to tap into. And that means I can't have anyone giving me messaging that says anything different.
Right. So what do you do with that messaging? Like, so much of what we encounter in our life is names or numbers or messages that other people gave us. And, we've internalized and become that. For me, it was fat. You're fat. And now, like, we know, okay, who cares? But, back in the 80s, that was, I might as well have, I don't know, been sent to another island.
Totally.
But what do you do with that messaging? So, you said to pick better messaging, or to have your own messaging that people are good and that we're good, I'm good. What's the process? What's the process of taking a message, not so great, and turning it around to be something positive for you?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's as much turning around that message versus acknowledging what it is. Like, one thing that I've become obsessed with lately is, and my wife's like probably super annoyed because I keep asking this like question, when I encounter, or she encounters, like some aggressive language or something that hits a part of us that we don't want to be hit, I always say, like, is that my thing or is that their thing? Like, in my response, like, what is mine to work through and what is theirs that I do not need to take? Like, that I do not need to carry. Like, that good. That's yours. And that may have hurt me. And now I need to, like, process that. That's my thing. But, like, it's just not mine. It's not mine to carry. And that's been a huge switch, because typically it's like, oh, well, this is someone's opinion of me, so that's mine to carry. When it's like, no, that's theirs. And you can just kindly give it back to them. And what do you want to carry? Right. Which is hard work, especially when it's something that hits and you're like, oh, like, like, what happened just now? There was one of my best friends who I asked to be my wedding, and she said no. And for a very long time, we would have conversations where I, like, felt bad, like, for asking her, for, like, putting, like, and finally I was like, what is mine? Like, what is mine to carry? And, like, what do I get to kindly say? Like, I know this feels like it might be about me, but I actually think this might be yours. And I'm like, happy to give this back to you. Because
in the form of a bag of poo on your doorstep.
Exactly.
Here's your message back.
Exactly. But you're like, you know what I mean? Like, we get into these rhythms of, like, oh, this person is talking to me as if something is my fault, or something is mine to carry, or someone's perception of your body is, like, your responsibility. When it's like, oh, I'm going to just very politely give that back and go over here.
So how do you handle this in our social media world? I know you've grown exponentially, and that's the worst. I've been slowly dragging around here for 10 years. And so nothing, pow has hit me. I've just been watching the haters, just whatever. But how has that been? What tips do you have for, other than block, delete, swipe, keep the comment, respond? Like, what do you do? I just delete. I went through the period of responding, and I thought, this is not mine.
Yep.
Literally, you're gone. No longer mine.
I know. It is so tempting, but I don't respond. I will not. And when someone's asking a genuine question, hey, can you help me understand? Like, I get a lot of messages like, I grew up thinking this was wrong, but then, like, I see you and your wife, and I want to, and then I'm like, oh, here's a resource, here's a book list. That was just a general question, versus someone who's like, you're going to go to, like, no, I'm not going to respond. And that's like, I have to always ask myself, the times that I am tempted to respond is because there's something that I'm struggling to believe about myself.
Right. There's always an iota of either truth or untruth that you haven't quite sorted out,
Exactly.
It's like,
So it's like, how dare you? And I'm like, how dare I? And then I'm like, okay, let me sit with that. I vowed, after being in that experience when we first came out, I spent a lot of time trying to defend myself to everyone from that church. And after realizing what I was doing and none of it going well anytime ever, like, I sort of said, like, I'm not going to be in the business of defending who I am anymore. Like, I'm not going to do that. And that's what a lot of people are baiting you to do. Like, tell me why you think you deserve. And it's like, no, I can't with social media. I can, because it has these beautiful parts, but sometimes I'm like, what is happening?
And I know what you mean, because I had, I've been really able to just delete for a long time. Oh, you're fat and slow. Okay, wow, give me something new. Oh, you're a fraud. Okay, I said that in my first book. Like, I'm just delete. But after I did an Instagram, I don't even know what prompted it, but I got a message from a girl from the cult church who posted on my Instagram, and she's like, Meredith, I am so sorry to see that you have fallen away from God and all this, and I was like, you don't even know where I am with God. Stay out of, you don't know. And then, but I just had a podcast conversation where I'm like, spirituality is really tough for me, because I'm still like grappling with all of it, the way I was raised versus how, I'm very liberal, but I believe all of it. Right. And so this girl coming out of the flames from, I don't even know when. I mean, we went to VBS together.
Oh,
like that's
VBS.
The last time I've seen her, we were doing paper crafts. And so, I kind of lost it. I posted something, I went off, and then I posted it, and then I was like, delete, block. Like, I
know.
But then why are you looking at me? Why are you following me?
I do have this theory, because my wife and I always are like, some people who are like, okay, no, not for me, whatever. And I'm like, okay, fine. It's just, they disagreed, I disagreed, we go our separate ways. But some people are so mad that I'm gay. And I swear it's half joke, half true. Like, I think they're gay. Like, anyone who is that mad about so mad that they are like every post commenting, reading blogs commenting. And I'm like, why are you this up in my life? And I'm like, oh man,
you're so gay.
Yes. You have, I think they're looking at me and saying, you got to do that, but I don't get to do that. So like, I'm going to make you hurt, or like, I'm going to bring you down. Yes. It's like, that girl from BBS is probably like, I would give anything to leave this world. Like, it's oppressive and I hate it, but I can't. So like, I want to make you bad.
Yes.
Feel bad for having like what I can't have.
Because I talked to my mom about it. I said, Ma, you remember this girl? She's like, oh, she's crazy. And her husband's even crazier. Yeah. And so I'm thinking, because I mean, there was probably something in there about marriage too, just, you're so right. If it's not like they're gay, then you're right. You have done the freedom, you've done the work, you've been true to yourself, your heart. And so many of us are selling out on our heart and ourselves. And so it could have been like, I'm going to take those zoo animals and start a zoo, and they'd have still been pissed off at you because you were even following your heart.
Right. Like, oh, you walked away, or you do this thing. It's like, oh, do you feel trapped? Like, what are you trying to say? Like, which I'm not engaged, but that's like always what I think in my mind of like, oh man, like, for you to get that angry at such a peripheral character in your life living, like, you're angry, like, you want that. There's something in you that is like so mad. And then for that, it allows me to have a little more compassion. Like, I'm still not going to respond. I'm still going to block you and delete every comment, but I'm going to have a little compassion of like, okay, like,
And this, I mean, it's the same with the privilege argument. If you talk about race, you talk about privilege, that people get so angry, like, you're taking a piece of my pie. I'm like, everyone gets their own pie. And I mean, same thing, because they can't look in the mirror. They can't see who they are, or they see who they are, and they're like, I mean, I don't know what that's about. I don't know what the anger is.
It's part of the same thing of like, you have to know it's true. Like, to be that angry.
I feel like, I know, but dude, like,
and that's the thing where it's like, Well, okay, so James Baldwin has this quote. It's my favorite quote from him. He says, I imagine the reason people cling so tightly to hate is because they fear once the hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with pain.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens with homophobic Christians. Like even if your views have changed and deep down you know you're wrong, you can't say that, because what does that mean for the way you have treated the queer people in your life? Like, you would have to deal with that. And so for, white people who just will revolt at the idea of acknowledging or even getting in a conversation about anti-racism, it's like, even if you know that, I mean, you have eyes, right? You have to know that this is true. And if you acknowledge that it's true, what does that mean for the way you have treated people of color, for the jokes you have co-signed on, for the things you have laughed at, for the systems you have participated in? You have to deal with that, and it might be painful. So instead of dealing with that pain, you're just going to cling to the hate.
To your hate.
Yeah.
That's a great quote.
Yeah.
Great
Got
quote.
me fired up there.
I know.
And another thing.
Stick around. Let's keep going.
My pastor days are coming back.
I know. Like, well, get out of. Come on, you got a passage.
Yeah, come
for
on.
that.
Right, yeah.
Jesus wept. Shortest book in the Bible.
To my
Trivia
second
2.
point. Yeah.
We were watching Jeopardy like on a drive by. I don't even know, it was just on, and one of the questions was shortest passage in the Bible. I was like, Jesus wept, and my husband's like, what? And I'm like, I know that stuff.
You're like, I got that one. That's just that's a thing everyone knows. Yeah.
I know. Well, Britt, this was so awesome. Thank you so much. I ask the same question of all my guests, so I'd like to ask you now. This podcast is called The Same 24 Hours, meaning we all have the same 24 hours in our day, but it's what we do in those 24 hours that leads to our greatest health, happiness, and success. So what is something that you do on a daily basis that really strengthens your day and makes the most of your 24 hours?
Okay, so one thing weirdly that I try to do every day, I'm an Enneagram 7. Don't know if you're familiar with Enneagram.
Yes, I'm an 8 with a 7 wing.
Okay. I do laugh every day. And not every day I feel like laughing. And some days it just comes naturally. And even in harder seasons, I started doing laughing, breath work.
Oh,
laughing yoga.
This I have not heard of.
It's so weird, but you take a deep breath and you're like, ha, 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 ha. And honestly, if you do that 3 times in a row, eventually you're literally laughing.
Oh my gosh, stop it. I have not heard that. That's awesome.
It's really good for you. The physiological benefits of laughing hard are there. So I try to do it every day.
I love it. So you're a 7. What is your wing?
8 wing.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, that's why we're jiving.
Don't get me started. Exactly.
But that's why, because I'm almost weighted equally 7, 8. But I'm definitely more the 8 wins, but I'm like, woo, no, we need to follow the rules.
Yeah. I used to joke that I'm a 7 wing 7. Because so many of the stereotypes, I'm like, but I definitely have that 8 wing, and I'll get after it. So.
And what is your wife? What Enneagram?
She's a 9 wing 8.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's where we connect.
Oh, I can see that though.
Yeah.
So anyone listening who's like, what are you guys talking about? The Enneagram. I feel like everyone has to know about Enneagram at this point. But if you don't, go to EnneagramInstitute.com. That's probably the main page. You can take the Ready test, RHETI, not ready. Like, ooh, I'm ready. And get your number.
One at church, our progressive church, just have to clarify, not megachurch. My co-pastor, Corey, so I'm a 7 and so is his wife. He was saying that one day, from the stage, he was like, oh, I love 7s. My wife's a 7. Britt's a 7. He was like, oh, and then there were 3 other people who happen to be women. He was like, oh, Alex is a 7, Sandy is a 7. And someone thought he meant out of 10.
Oh.
And then came up to him after, because he didn't say any, because we, everyone knows. So he just said
funny.
And then he, was like, oh, Sandy's a 7, Alex is a 7. He's like,
everyone's like, wow, what a jerk.
I know, what? And you're not even gonna say they're 10s. You're gonna point them out and say oh, that's you're a funny. 7.
That's
Anyways,
hilarious. Oh my gosh.
so.
All right. Well, tell everyone where they can find you. Of course, you can get your book wherever books are sold, I assume.
Yes, find Worth It anywhere books are sold. You can find me on Instagram at Brit Barron, on the internet at britbarron.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Britt.
Thank you.